Picture this, a 17-year-old kid walking through an airport terminal wearing a pilot's uniform. He's carrying a briefcase, nodding to flight attendants, looking like he owns the place. Everyone assumes he's legitimate. Everyone trusts him. But here's the thing, he's never flown a plane in his life. He's a fraud. A con artist. A master of deception. Now imagine this same kid falling head over heels in love. Real, genuine love. The kind that makes you want to be honest for the first time in your life. The kind that could either save you or destroy everything you've built. This is the story of Marcus Sullivan, a boy who became a man while pretending to be everyone else. A story about love found in the most impossible circumstances. A story about the lies we tell and the truths we can't escape. By the end, you'll understand why the greatest con Marcus ever pulled wasn't fooling the FBI, the banks, or the airlines. It was convincing someone he was worth loving. Let me take you back to where it all began. Detroit, Michigan. 1968. Marcus Sullivan was just a kid living in what everyone thought was the perfect American family. White picket fence. Stay-at-home mom. Dad who owned his own business. From the outside, they had it all figured out. But inside that house, everything was falling apart. His father, Robert Sullivan, ran a small printing business. On the surface, he was charming, the kind of guy who could sell ice to an Eskimo. But the business was hemorrhaging money, and the IRS had started asking uncomfortable questions about his taxes. The kind of questions that don't go away. Marcus would watch his father put on a suit every morning, practice his smile in the mirror, and head to the bank. Somehow, Robert always came back with another loan, another extension, another chance. The man was drowning in debt, but he could still convince people to trust him with their money. Son, his father told him once, people don't trust what's real. They trust what looks real. Remember that. Marcus didn't understand it then. But he would. In 1969, everything fell apart at once. The IRS case went to trial. His mother, Caroline, filed for divorce. And 14-year-old Marcus found himself sitting in a courtroom, being asked the impossible question. Marcus, which parent do you want to live with? His mother was crying. His father was staring straight ahead, jaw clenched. And Marcus? Marcus felt like he was being torn in half. He couldn't choose. How do you choose between the two people who are supposed to love you most? So he didn't. That night, Marcus packed a small bag, took $42 from his mother's purse and ran. Marcus spent his first night away from home in a bus station, sleeping on a hard plastic chair, using his jacket as a blanket. He was terrified, cold, hungry, and completely alone. But here's what he learned that first day. People don't look at you the same way when you're dirty and desperate. They avoid eye contact. They hurry past. It's like you're invisible. The next day, Marcus spent 15 of his precious dollars at a thrift store. He bought a cheap suit, too big for him, but presentable. He washed his face in a gas station bathroom, combed his hair, straightened his tie. Then he walked into a bank with a story. "Excuse me," he said to the teller, voice shaking slightly. "I'm so embarrassed. I'm a student, and I lost my wallet. My father's wiring me money, but it won't arrive until tomorrow. Is there any way you could help me with just $50? I can come back and repay you as soon as..." The teller looked at him. Saw a clean-cut, well-spoken young man in distress. Saw someone who looked trustworthy. She gave him the money. Just like that, Marcus walked out of that bank with $50 he'd never have to repay, and he learned the most important lesson of his life. His father was right. People don't trust what's real. They trust what looks real. Over the next 6 months, Marcus refined his technique. He moved from city to city, never staying long enough for anyone to catch on. He learned that certain professions came with automatic respect. Doctors. People trusted doctors. Lawyers. People trusted lawyers. And pilots? People really trusted pilots. In 1970, 16-year-old Marcus walked into a uniform supply store in Chicago with a heartbreaking story about being a new Continental Airlines pilot who'd lost everything in a house fire. He walked out with a complete pilot's uniform. Then he went to work. Using the printing knowledge he'd picked up from watching his father, Marcus forged an airline ID. It wasn't perfect, But it didn't need to be. This was 1970. There were no computer databases. No instant verification systems. If you had a uniform and an ID that looked official, people believed you. And Marcus? Marcus looked very official. He discovered something called deadheading. Pilots could ride in the cockpit of flights for free just by showing their credentials. So that's what he did. He'd walk into airports, flash his fake ID, and get waved through to the cockpit. Can you imagine? A 16-year-old kid sitting in the cockpit of a commercial airliner, pretending to be a pilot. But the uniform was just the beginning. Marcus's real innovation was the checks. Using his father's old printing equipment knowledge, Marcus figured out how to create convincing forgeries. He'd open a bank account, deposit a forged check for thousands of dollars, and the bank would give him immediate access to some of the funds. By the time the check bounced, which took days or even weeks back then, Marcus would be 3 states away. New Orleans, Los Angeles, Boston, Seattle, Phoenix, Miami. Marcus hopscotched across America, staying in luxury hotels, eating at expensive restaurants, flying first class. All on forged checks and a fake identity. By the time he was 17, Marcus Sullivan had forged over $2 million in checks. But here's what nobody understood. Marcus wasn't doing this for the money. Sure, the luxury was nice. But mostly, he was running. Running from the choice he couldn't make. Running from the broken family. Running from himself. He lived in hotel rooms and airports. Always moving. Never staying long enough to form real connections. Never letting anyone get close enough to see through the uniform to the scared kid underneath. He was lonely. Desperately, achingly lonely. Living a dozen different lives, but not really living at all. Until the summer of 1971, when everything changed. New Orleans. French Quarter. The air thick with humidity and jazz music. Marcus had been in the city for 2 weeks, playing a different role this time. Dr. Marcus Whitfield, pediatric resident at a local hospital. He'd forged medical credentials, charmed his way into a position, and was careful to only handle paperwork and administrative tasks. Nothing that required actual medical knowledge. It was his most audacious con yet. The hospital was hosting a charity fundraiser, black tie, champagne, the city's elite rubbing elbows and writing checks for sick kids. Marcus went because that's what a young doctor would do. Make connections. Play the part. That's where he saw her. Claire Brennan stood by the bar, looking slightly uncomfortable in her formal dress. She had kind eyes and kept fidgeting with her bracelet, a nervous habit that Marcus found instantly endearing. He walked over, ordered a drink he wouldn't finish, and introduced himself. Dr. Marcus Whitfield, he said, offering his hand. Pediatrics. Claire Brennan, she replied. Nursing student. Also pediatrics, actually. They started talking. And something strange happened. Marcus, who'd spent years lying to everyone about everything, found himself telling the truth. Not about who he was still Dr. Whitfield, still wearing the white coat of lies. But about what he thought. What he felt. What mattered to him. Claire was studying pediatric nursing because she wanted to help kids who couldn't help themselves. Marcus found himself talking about children he'd seen at the hospital, the ones who were scared and alone. He talked about what it felt like to be a kid with nowhere to go. He was describing himself, really. Just wrapped in different circumstances. They talked for 3 hours. The fundraiser ended and they barely noticed. I should go, Claire finally said, reluctant. Early shift tomorrow. Can I see you again? Marcus asked. And for the first time in years, he actually cared about the answer. I'd like that, Claire smiled. As she turned to leave, she mentioned casually, my father will want to meet you eventually. He's very protective. FBI agent, you know how it is. Marcus's blood ran cold. FBI, he managed to say, keeping his voice steady. Yeah, he investigates fraud cases mostly. Check forgery, that kind of thing. Pretty boring stuff, really. She waved goodbye, completely unaware that she just told a check forger that her father was the FBI agent hunting people exactly like him. Any sane person would have run. Would have left New Orleans that night and never looked back. But Marcus? Marcus called her the next day and asked her to dinner. Over the next 3 months, Marcus and Claire fell in love. The kind that sneaks up on you. The kind that changes everything. They'd have coffee before her shifts. He'd pick her up after his hospital rounds, and they'd walk along the Mississippi River, talking about everything and nothing. She'd tell him about her nursing classes, about the patients who broke her heart, about wanting to make a difference. He'd tell her about growing up, with edited details, about feeling lost, about trying to find his place in the world. For the first time since running away, Marcus felt like he had a home. Not a place, a person. But every moment was poisoned by fear. Every time Claire mentioned her father, Marcus's heart would race. Every time she talked about trust and honesty, he'd feel sick with guilt. Every time she looked at him with those kind eyes and said, "I love you," he wanted to tell her the truth and knew he couldn't. Because the truth would destroy everything. Claire's father, Special Agent Thomas Brennan, was actively investigating a check forger who'd been operating across the Southeast. Claire would mention it occasionally. Dad's working late again, chasing his mysterious check guy, completely unaware that the mysterious check guy was taking her to dinner. Marcus knew he should leave. Every rational part of his brain screamed at him to run, like he always did. But he couldn't. For the first time in his life, he had something he didn't want to lose. So he stayed. Weeks turned into months. He stayed in New Orleans longer than he'd stayed anywhere. The forged checks he'd deposited weeks ago were bouncing. Banks were asking questions. The net was tightening. But he stayed. Because every morning, Claire would smile at him over coffee and he'd think, maybe I could be this person for real. Maybe Dr. Marcus Whitfield doesn't have to be a lie. Maybe I could actually become someone worthy of her. Then reality would crash back in. He wasn't a doctor. He was a criminal. A fraud. A kid playing dress-up in a world where the consequences were very, very real. Claire started asking to meet his colleagues. To see his apartment. To be more involved in his life. And Marcus started running out of excuses. My place is being renovated. My colleagues are on different schedules. I'm so busy with this case, can we do it next week? She was starting to notice the holes in his story. The inconsistencies. The way he'd changed the subject when she asked certain questions. One night, after dinner, she looked at him seriously and said, "Marcus, are you hiding something from me?" His heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. Sometimes it feels like there are parts of your life you don't want me to see. Like you're keeping me at arm's length." This was his moment. He could tell her the truth. Could explain everything. Could throw himself on her mercy and hope she'd understand. Instead, he kissed her. Pulled her close and kissed her like it might be the last time. "I'm not hiding anything," he lied. I've never felt this way about anyone before. Sometimes I'm afraid I'll mess it up." That part at least was true. She softened. "You won't mess it up. I trust you." Those 3 words, "I trust you," hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. It couldn't last forever. Marcus knew that. But he didn't expect it to end the way it did. Claire finally insisted, "My father wants to meet you. This weekend. No more excuses." Marcus spent a week preparing. He researched Johns Hopkins Medical School, where Dr. Whitfield supposedly went, until he could describe the campus in his sleep. He memorized the names of professors, the layout of buildings, the traditions and culture. He rehearsed answers to potential questions. Built out his entire fictional backstory until it felt real even to him. Saturday night. An upscale restaurant in the Garden District. Marcus arrived first, wearing his best suit, looking every inch the respectable young doctor. Claire arrived with her father. Special Agent Thomas Brennan was exactly what Marcus expected. Late 50s, iron gray hair, eyes that missed nothing. He shook Marcus's hand with a grip that was just slightly too firm. The test. "Dr. Whitfield. I've heard a lot about you." "All good things, I hope," Marcus replied smoothly. "We'll see." Dinner was an interrogation disguised as polite conversation. Brennan asked about medical school, Marcus's family, his career plans, his intentions toward Claire. Marcus had answers for everything. Smooth, confident, rehearsed answers. He described Johns Hopkins in vivid detail, The fall colors on campus, the stress of finals, the pride of graduation. All fiction. All delivered with the confidence of truth. Brennan mentioned he'd gone to Georgetown. Had Marcus ever visited D.C.? Without missing a beat, Marcus described a weekend trip to visit a friend, museums he'd seen, restaurants he'd eaten at. All made up on the spot. Claire watched them talk, proud that her two favorite men were getting along. Marcus watched Brennan, trying to read whether the agent suspected anything. As dinner wound down, Brennan excused himself to take a phone call. Claire went to the restroom. For 60 seconds, Marcus sat alone at the table, heart pounding, wondering if he'd pulled it off. When Brennan returned, he sat down and looked at Marcus for a long moment. "You're good," he finally said. "I'm sorry." "You're very good." Smooth. Confident. Believable. Brennan leaned forward. "Claire speaks very highly of you, Dr. Whitfield. She trusts you. She's falling in love with you, I think." Marcus didn't know what to say. "Trust is sacred," Brennan continued. "Don't you think? Once broken, it's almost impossible to repair. A man who violates trust, that's not someone I want anywhere near my daughter." The message was clear. "I'm watching you." "I would never hurt Claire," Marcus said. And he meant it. "I hope not," Brennan replied. "Because if you did, I'd make it my personal mission to destroy you. We understand each other?" "Yes, sir." Claire returned, oblivious to the tension. "So? Are you two getting along?" "Very well," Brennan said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Dr. Whitfield is exactly as you described him." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the conversation, analyzing every word, every look. Did Brennan suspect? Or was this just standard protective father behavior? Either way, the message was clear. The clock was ticking. 2 days after that dinner, Marcus's world began to collapse. The hospital's routine audit discovered irregularities in Dr. Marcus Whitfield's credentials. The medical degree from Johns Hopkins, they called to verify it. No record of anyone by that name graduating. The state medical board license, fake. Everything was fake. The hospital immediately launched an internal investigation and contacted the police. The police contacted the FBI. And the FBI agent who caught the case? Special Agent Thomas Brennan. Marcus didn't know any of this yet. He was at Claire's apartment, helping her study for an exam, blissfully unaware that his entire house of cards was collapsing. Then his pager went off. Remember, this was 1971, no cell phones. The hospital needed him to come in immediately. "Emergency?" Claire asked, concerned. "Probably just a busy night," Marcus lied. He kissed her goodbye, promised to call later. When he got to the hospital, security was waiting. "Dr. Whitfield, please come with us." They escorted him to an office where 2 police detectives were waiting. They asked him to verify his credentials, to explain his medical degree, to account for his employment history. Marcus knew immediately it was over. He could try to bluff his way through, could spin another story. But looking at their faces, he knew they already had the answers. He said the only smart thing he'd said in months, "I want a lawyer." They arrested him that night. Charged him with fraud, forgery, impersonating a medical professional. As they put handcuffs on him, all Marcus could think about was Claire. How was he going to explain this to Claire? He didn't have to. Agent Brennan took care of that. Claire found out the next morning when her father showed up at her apartment, looking grim. "We need to talk about Marcus." "What about him? Is he okay?" "His name isn't Marcus Whitfield. He's not a doctor. He's a con artist and a forger, and he's been using you." Claire didn't believe him at first. Couldn't believe him. This was Marcus. Her Marcus. The man she loved. But then her father showed her everything. The arrest report. The fake credentials. The trail of forged checks across a dozen states. The real name, Marcus Sullivan, age 17. 17. He'd been 16 when they met. A kid. "He was using you to get close to me," Brennan said, his voice gentle but firm. "To learn about the investigation. This is what con artists do." "No," Claire said, tears streaming down her face. No, what we had was real. I know it was real. He's a professional liar, sweetheart. Nothing about him was real. But Claire kept remembering moments. The way Marcus looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. The vulnerability he'd shown when talking about feeling lost. The truth she'd seen beneath the lies. Was it all fake? Could someone fake that? She didn't know what to believe anymore. Marcus spent 3 days in jail before they set bail. His father, who he hadn't spoken to in years, somehow heard about the arrest and scraped together the money. They met in a bail bondsman's office. Robert Sullivan looked older, grayer, defeated by life. So, his father said, "You've been using what I taught you." "Yeah. How's that working out for you?" Marcus almost laughed. "Almost. Not great, Dad." Robert sighed. "I never wanted this for you. The charm, the salesmanship, that was supposed to be for legitimate business. You taught me that appearance matters more than truth. I taught you to survive. You turned it into a lifestyle." His father looked at him seriously. "You're 17 years old and facing federal charges. You understand how bad this is?" Marcus understood. He was looking at 20 years in prison. Maybe more. "There's something else," his father said. "The FBI agent handling your case, Agent Brennan. His daughter is the girl you've been dating, isn't she?" Marcus nodded miserably. "Jesus, Marks. Did you know who she was when you started dating her?" "Not at first. By the time I found out, I was already—" He trailed off. "Already in love with her," his father finished. "So now what?" "Now I lose her along with everything else." Robert was quiet for a moment. Then, "Maybe you don't have to." "What do you mean?" "Agent Brennan called me. He wants to meet with you. Just you and him, off the record, before the formal charges are processed." Marcus's stomach dropped. "Why?" "I don't know. But son, this might be your only chance to make something right." They met at a coffee shop. Public. Neutral territory. Agent Brennan looked like he hadn't slept. Marcus knew he looked worse. They sat in silence for a long moment, neither knowing how to start. Finally, Brennan spoke. "Tell me about Johns Hopkins." Marcus's first instinct was to launch into his well-rehearsed story. But what was the point? He was already caught. "I've never been to Johns Hopkins," he admitted quietly. "I looked at pictures. Read about it online. Made it all up." "The medical degree?" "Forged." "Your name?" "Marcus Sullivan. From Detroit." "Your age?" 17. 18 next month." Brennan absorbed this. "So everything you told my daughter was a lie." "Not everything." Marcus looked up, met the agent's eyes. "How I felt about her, that was real. That was the only real thing." "How convenient." "It's true. I know you don't believe me, and I don't blame you. But Claire, she made me want to be the person I was pretending to be. For the first time, I wanted to stop running." "But you didn't stop." "No. Because I'm a coward." They sat in silence again. Finally, Brennan said, "I could throw the book at you. Multiple counts of fraud, forgery, impersonating a medical professional. You'd be in prison until you're middle-aged." Marcus nodded. He knew. "But I'm going to give you a choice instead." Marcus looked up, surprised. "Walk away right now. Leave New Orleans. Never contact Claire again. Give her a chance to heal and move on. Do that, and I'll advocate for a reduced sentence. You'll serve time but not decades. And the other option? Turn yourself in. Fully cooperate. Give us details on every check you forged, every identity you assumed. Help us close open cases. And then," Brennan paused. "Then we'll see if there's a path forward." "A path forward to what?" "To redemption. To becoming the man my daughter thought you were." Brennan leaned forward. "Here's what I think, Marcus. I think you're a scared kid who made terrible choices. I think you're smart enough and young enough to change. But I also think that unless you face real consequences and do real work, you'll keep running forever." "Why would you help me?" "I lied to your daughter. Because despite everything, Claire still believes in you. And I trust my daughter's judgment. So prove her right. Or prove her wrong. Your choice. Brennan stood to leave. You have 24 hours to decide. Run or turn yourself in. Marcus sat alone in that coffee shop for 2 hours, staring at cold coffee, facing the biggest choice of his life. He thought about running. He had contacts who could get him a new identity. He could disappear, start over somewhere else. But then he thought about Claire. About the look in her eyes when she talked about helping people. About the way she'd said, "I trust you." He thought about spending the rest of his life running, always looking over his shoulder, never able to be real with anyone. And he realized, he was tired of running. That night, Marcus went to the park where he and Claire used to meet. She was there, sitting on their bench, like she'd known he'd come. "Claire. Don't," she said, voice breaking. "Please don't try to explain. I have to. You deserve the truth." The truth? I don't even know what that is anymore. Was any of it real, Marcus? Or was I just part of some elaborate con? No. God, no. Marcus sat beside her, careful not to touch her. Everything else was fake. The name, the degree, the job, all of it. But you? What I felt for you was the only real thing in my life. How am I supposed to believe that? You're not. I've given you no reason to trust me. Marcus took a shaky breath. My real name is Marcus Sullivan. I'm 17. I ran away from home when I was 14 because my parents were getting divorced and I couldn't choose between them. I've been running ever since, living in hotels, pretending to be different people. Claire was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. I never meant to hurt you, Marcus continued. Meeting you, that wasn't part of any plan. And falling in love with you definitely wasn't part of the plan. You made me want to stop lying. To be real. But I was in so deep, and I didn't know how to get out. So what happens now? Tomorrow, I'm turning myself in. Fully cooperating with your father's investigation. I'll probably go to prison for a long time. And you? He had to force the words out. You should forget about me. Move on. Find someone who deserves you. And if I don't want to forget you? Marcus looked at her, hardly daring to hope. Claire. I'm so angry at you, she said. You lied to me about everything. You made me fall in love with someone who doesn't even exist. I know. I'm sorry. But the person I fell in love with, the one who understood what it's like to feel lost, who cared about scared kids in hospitals, who made me laugh, was that person real at all? Marcus thought about it. Really thought about it. I don't know, he finally admitted. I've been pretending for so long, I don't know who I actually am. But with you? I think I was closer to my real self than I've ever been. Claire stood up. I need time. To think. To process all of this. I understand. She started to walk away, then stopped. Marcus? For what it's worth. I hope you find out who you really are. Not Dr. Whitfield. Not whoever else you've been pretending to be. Just you. Then she was gone. Marcus sat alone on that bench until sunrise, mourning the loss of the only real thing he'd ever had. The next morning he walked into the FBI field office and surrendered. The legal process was brutal. Marcus pled guilty to multiple counts of fraud and forgery. With full cooperation and Agent Brennan's recommendation, he received 5 years instead of the 20 he could have faced. 5 years. He'd be 23 when he got out. His entire youth gone. But here's the strange thing, as terrifying as prison was, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years. Relief. No more running. No more lies. No more waking up every morning wondering if today was the day it all fell apart. He was Marcus Sullivan. 17 years old. A high school dropout and convicted felon. But for the first time since running away, he knew exactly who he was. 3 weeks into his sentence, he got his first visitor. Claire. She looked different. Older somehow. Sadder. They sat across from each other, separated by glass and phones. I wasn't sure you'd come, Marcus said. I wasn't sure I would either. Silence. How are you holding up? She asked. Okay, I guess. That's weird. Scary. But also kind of a relief. She nodded like she understood. Claire, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest. "Isn't that ironic?" she said, but there was no malice in it. "If we'd never met, would I have stopped? Would I have turned myself in?" She thought about it. "No. Probably not." "That's what I thought." Marcus leaned forward. "But meeting you made me want to. You made me see that there was something worth being honest for. Someone worth being real for. Is that supposed to make me feel better? That I inspired you to stop being a criminal? No. I just wanted you to know that you changed me. In the most important way someone can change another person, you made me want to be better." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know if we can come back from this, Marcus. The lies, the deception. I know. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know that what we had, what I felt, that was real." They talked for an hour. Not about the future, there might not be one. Just about the present. About her nursing school. About his prison classes. About small, normal things. As visiting time ended, Claire said something that gave Marcus a sliver of hope. "I'm not making any promises. But maybe I'll visit again." "I'd like that." She did visit again. And again. Over the next few months, she came every few weeks. Sometimes they talked about the past, working through the hurt. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence. Slowly, painfully, something began to heal. For years, Marcus served 4 years of his 5-year sentence, getting out early for good behavior. Those 4 years changed him in ways he never expected. He got his GD. Started taking college courses by correspondence. Went to therapy, real therapy, not just because it looked good for the parole board, but because he genuinely wanted to understand why he'd made the choices he'd made. He learned that running from hard choices just creates harder ones down the road. That the lies you tell yourself are more dangerous than the lies you tell others. That becoming real, genuinely, authentically real, is harder than any con he'd ever pulled. Claire visited throughout those 4 years. Not every week, but regularly. They talked honestly about their relationship, about whether there was any possibility of a future. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she admitted during one visit. "I don't know if I can trust myself," Marcus replied. "But I'm trying to become someone trustworthy. Someone who deserves your trust." "But for me." "Partly. But also for me. I'm tired of being whoever people want me to be. I want to know who Marcus Sullivan actually is." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said. When Marcus was released in 1976, he was 22 years old with a prison record, no real job history, and very few prospects. But Agent Brennan offered him something unexpected, a job. "The FBI needs consultants who understand fraud," Brennan explained. "Your skills, the forgery detection, the understanding of con artist psychology, they're valuable. You want to hire me? After everything? I want to give you a chance to use what you know for good. To help catch people like you used to be." Brennan looked at him seriously. "This isn't charity, Marcus. It's opportunity. What you do with it is up to you." Marcus took the job. Moved to Washington, D.C. Started the slow, difficult work of building a legitimate life. And he didn't contact Claire. For 2 years, he didn't call, didn't write. It was the hardest thing he'd ever done, but he knew he had to do it. Had to prove to himself that he could build something real before asking her to be part of it. He worked for the FBI, helping solve fraud cases. He was good at it. He could spot forgeries instantly, understand the criminals' thinking, predict their next move. He rented a small apartment. Paid his taxes. Reported to his parole officer. Did all the boring, normal things that regular people do. And slowly he started to understand who Marcus Sullivan was when he wasn't pretending to be someone else. November 1978. Marcus came home to find a message on his answering machine. "Hi Marcus. It's Claire. I've been thinking about you. Wondering how you're doing. I saw an article about your work with the FBI. I'm proud of you. Anyway, I'm in Boston now, got my nursing degree. If you ever want to talk, here's my number." Marcus played that message 17 times. Then he picked up the phone. They agreed to meet in Philadelphia, neutral territory, halfway between Boston and D.C. Marcus was terrified. It had been 2 years since he'd seen her. What if she'd changed her mind? What if seeing him brought back all the pain? But when Claire walked into that train station, and their eyes met, Marcus knew. She still cared. And so did he. They spent the day walking around the city, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about nursing school, about her work at a children's hospital. He told her about the FBI work, about his therapy, about learning to be honest even when it was hard. "So who is Marcus Sullivan?" she finally asked. "For real this time." Marcus thought about it. "He's someone who made terrible mistakes. Who hurt people, including you. Who's trying every day to be better than he was. He's not a doctor or a pilot or anyone impressive. He's just a guy trying to figure out how to live an honest life. That's all. That's everything. Being honestly myself, that's the hardest thing I've ever done." Claire smiled. "I think I'd like to get to know that person." They didn't rush into anything. They took it slow. Phone calls. Weekend visits. Building trust brick by brick. A year later, Claire moved to D.C. for a job at Georgetown University Hospital. They still didn't live together, too much, too fast, but they were in the same city for the first time since everything fell apart. They went to couples therapy together. Not because things were broken, but because they wanted to make sure they didn't break again. "Trust isn't automatic after what we've been through," their therapist explained. "It's a choice you both make every day." And they did choose. Every single day. Marcus chose to be completely transparent about his work, his whereabouts, his finances. No secrets. No hidden parts of his life. Claire chose to believe him while also protecting herself. To give him trust while maintaining boundaries. It wasn't perfect. There were hard days. Days when Claire would find an inconsistency in something Marcus said and her mind would immediately jump to "he's lying again." Days when Marcus would feel suffocated by the constant need to prove himself. But they worked through it. The real test came when Marcus had to meet Claire's family again. Agent Brennan had seen Marcus's transformation firsthand through their FBI work. He'd watched Marcus catch forgers, help solve cases, do genuine good work. But Claire's mother? Her aunts and uncles? They just knew him as the con artist who'd broken their niece's heart. Family dinner. Claire's parents' house. Marcus wore his best suit, bought with honest money this time, and practiced breathing exercises in the car. "You'll be fine," Claire assured him. "They're not going to eat you alive. Your Aunt Margaret looks like she might." Claire laughed. "Okay, maybe Aunt Margaret." Inside, the initial greetings were polite but cold. Everyone knew who Marcus was. What he'd done. Dinner conversation was stilted. People asked careful questions, the kind designed to test him. "So Marcus," Aunt Margaret said sweetly, with daggers in her eyes. "What exactly do you do for the FBI?" "I'm a fraud consultant. I help identify forged documents and understand criminal psychology." "How convenient. Using your criminal skills legally now." "Margaret," Agent Brennan warned. "No, she's right," Marcus said calmly. "I did terrible things. I hurt a lot of people, including Claire. I can't change that. All I can do is spend the rest of my life trying to make amends and use what I learned to help others." "Pretty words," Margaret sniffed. "But Claire's young. She has her whole life ahead of her. Why should she waste it on someone with your history?" "She shouldn't," Marcus replied simply. "I've told her that. But Claire makes her own choices. And I'm grateful every day that she's chosen to give me a second chance." Claire's mother, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Mrs. Brennan." "Do you love my daughter?" "More than anything." "And if she asked you to leave, to walk away, would you?" Marcus looked at Claire, then back at her mother. "If that's what she needed to be happy, yes. But I'd spend the rest of my life hoping she'd change her mind." The room was quiet. Then Agent Brennan raised his glass. "Marcus made mistakes. Bad ones. But I've worked with him for 2 years now, and I've watched him earn his redemption. He's done more good preventing fraud than he ever did committing it. More importantly, he's made my daughter happy. That counts for something." It wasn't a full acceptance. But it was a start. After dinner, Agent Brennan pulled Marcus aside on the porch. "I was wrong about you," he said. Sir, that day in the coffee shop, I gave you a choice, run or change. I honestly didn't think you'd choose change. Thought you'd run like you always had. He looked at Marcus seriously. You proved me wrong. You did the hard work. You became someone better. I'm still working on it every day. That's what makes the difference. The ones who think they've arrived, they stop trying. You're still trying. Brennan put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. You're good for her. Just don't screw it up. I won't, sir. I promise. 2 years after their reunion in Philadelphia, Marcus decided it was time. He didn't want an elaborate proposal. The old Marcus would have created something showy and impressive, a performance designed to overwhelm judgment. The new Marcus wanted something simple and honest. He took Claire back to New Orleans, to the park where they'd first walked together, where he'd later confessed his lies. They sat on the same bench. I've been thinking, Marcus started, nervous in a way he hadn't been since he was 17. Dangerous, Claire teased. Seriously. I've been thinking about the first time I sat on this bench with you. I was pretending to be Dr. Whitfield. Pretending to have my life together. Pretending to be someone impressive. I remember. And then years later, I sat on this same bench and told you the truth. Told you I was just a scared kid who'd made terrible choices. Claire nodded, not sure where this was going. Today, I want to sit on this bench and tell you who I am now. Marcus turned to face her. I'm Marcus Sullivan. I'm 26 years old. I work for the FBI helping catch forgers. I go to therapy every week. I pay my taxes. I call my mom on Sundays. I'm boring and ordinary and flawed. He pulled out a small box. But the one extraordinary thing in my life is you. You saw the worst of me and still believed I could be better. You gave me a reason to stop running. To stop lying. To finally figure out who I actually am. He opened the box. A simple ring, nothing flashy. So I'm asking you as honestly as I know how, Claire Brennan, will you marry me? Claire was crying. Happy tears this time. Yes. God, yes. Marcus slipped the ring on her finger with shaking hands. I promise you, he said, voice thick with emotion. I will spend every day of our marriage being honest with you. No more lies. No more hiding. Just me. The real me. That's all I've ever wanted, Claire said and kissed him. June 1982. They got married in a small church in D.C. Nothing elaborate. Just family and close friends. Claire wore a simple white dress. Marcus wore a suit he'd bought with money from his honest job. The guest list was unusual, to say the least. FBI agents who'd investigated Marcus sitting next to his former parole officer. Claire's nursing colleagues sitting near Marcus's therapist. When it came time for vows, Marcus spoke from the heart. Claire, I've spent most of my life lying. Creating false identities. Pretending to be people I wasn't. But standing here today, saying these vows, this is the most honest thing I've ever done. His voice wavered slightly. I promise to be truthful with you, even when it's hard. I promise to be faithful, loyal, and present. I promise to keep working every day to be worthy of your trust. And I promise that when our kids ask about my past, and they will, I'll tell them the truth. The whole truth. Because they deserve to know who their father really is. Claire's vows were equally honest. Marcus, loving you has been the hardest and most rewarding thing I've ever done. You broke my heart. You lied to me. You made me question my own judgment. She paused, and some guests shifted uncomfortably. But you also showed me what real change looks like. What redemption means. What it takes to face your mistakes and become someone better. She smiled through tears. I choose you. Not the person you pretended to be. Not the mistakes you made. I choose the person you've become and the person you're still becoming. Every day I choose you. There wasn't a dry eye in the church. At the reception, Agent Brennan gave a toast that surprised everyone. I investigated Marcus Sullivan. I arrested him. And I wanted to hate him for what he'd done to my daughter. He looked at Marcus. But I've watched him over these past years. I've seen him do the hard work of changing. And I've learned something. We're not defined by our worst moments. We're defined by what we do after them. He raised his glass. To Marcus and Claire. To second chances. To choosing truth over comfort. And to building something real. Marriage wasn't always easy. Even years later, trust was something they had to actively maintain. There were moments when Claire's old fears would resurface. When Marcus would be late coming home and her mind would immediately think he's running again. When she'd find an unexplained charge on their bank account and her heart would race. But Marcus never got defensive about it. He understood. I earned that doubt, he'd tell his therapist. The least I can do is be patient while she works through it. And Claire worked on it too. On believing him. On giving him the benefit of the doubt. On trusting that people really can change. They had their first child in 1985. A daughter they named Emma. Holding her in the hospital, Marcus cried. What's wrong? Claire asked. Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. I never thought I'd have this. A family. A real life. Someone tiny who's going to call me dad and trust me completely. He looked at Claire. I can't screw this up. You won't. But what if I do? What if I pass on all my worst traits? What if she grows up and learns to lie like I did? Claire took his hand. Then we teach her better. We show her honesty. We model integrity. And when she's old enough to ask about your past, we tell her the truth. That conversation came sooner than they expected. Emma was 7 when she came home from school confused. Daddy, why does your resume say you went to different schools than other parents? Marcus looked at Claire. She nodded. Time for truth. He sat Emma down and explained, in age-appropriate terms, that when he was younger, he'd made very bad choices. That he'd lied and hurt people. That he'd gone to prison. Emma's eyes went wide. You were in jail? Yes. For 4 years. But, you're good now, right? Marcus smiled. I try to be. Every single day, I try to be good. And when I mess up, I apologize and try to do better. Okay, Emma said simply. Because to a 7-year-old, that made sense. As she grew older, she learned more details. By the time she was a teenager, she knew the full story. Her father had been a con artist who deceived her mother. Instead of being ashamed, Emma became fascinated by criminal psychology and redemption. She ended up going to law school, becoming a criminal defense attorney who specialized in helping reformed offenders. You showed me that people can change, she told Marcus at her law school graduation. That mistakes don't have to define you forever. Their son Daniel, born in 1987, took a different path. He became a teacher working with at-risk youth. I work with kids who are making the same mistakes you made, Daniel told Marcus. And I tell them your story. About how you could have stayed a criminal but chose to change. It gives them hope. In 2008, Agent Thomas Brennan passed away after a brief illness. At his funeral, Marcus gave a eulogy that left the entire church in tears. Agent Brennan arrested me when I was 17. He could have thrown away the key. Could have made sure I never got out of prison. Instead, he gave me a choice: keep running or face my mistakes and change. Marcus's voice broke. He didn't have to do that. I'd deceived his daughter. Violated his trust. Given him every reason to hate me. But instead, he gave me a chance. And then another chance. And another. Until I finally became someone worthy of those chances. He looked at Claire, sitting in the front row. He told me once that we're not defined by our worst moments. We're defined by what we do after them. Tom Brennan lived that philosophy. He believed in justice, but also in redemption. He believed people could change if they did the work. Marcus paused, collecting himself. I spent the last 26 years trying to prove him right. Trying to become the man he saw I could be. And every morning when I wake up next to his daughter, when I see my children who have his sense of integrity, I'm reminded that he gave me the greatest gift anyone can give: a second chance. After the funeral, Claire found Marcus sitting alone in their car. You okay? She asked. He was more of a father to me than my own dad ever was. Even after everything I did. Especially after everything I did. Marcus wiped his eyes. I never told you this, but right before he died, he called me to the hospital. Said he needed to tell me something. What did he say? He said, I was wrong about you, Marcus. I thought you changed because of Claire. Because you wanted to keep her. But you changed because of you. Because you finally wanted to know who you really were. That's real change. That's what matters. Marcus smiled through tears. Then he said, take care of my girl. You've earned that right. Claire took his hand. You have earned it. Every single day, you've earned it. Years passed. Marcus and Claire grew older together, building a life that was ordinary and extraordinary all at once. Marcus continued his work with the FBI until he retired at 60. Over his career, he helped solve hundreds of fraud cases, preventing millions in losses. He lectured at law enforcement academies. He wrote a book about fraud prevention, donating all proceeds to victim support organizations. He never tried to profit from his criminal past. Never tried to make himself look clever or impressive. He always framed his story as a cautionary tale. I was good at lying, he'd tell audiences. But being good at lying doesn't make you special. It makes you dangerous. To others and to yourself. Claire retired from nursing at 62, after a distinguished career helping thousands of children. She also published a memoir about loving someone through their transformation. The book was honest, sometimes brutally so, about the difficulty of rebuilding trust. About the nights she'd cried herself to sleep wondering if she was being foolish. About the moments of doubt that lingered even decades later. But it was also about hope. About how people really can change if they do the genuine work. About how love isn't blind acceptance, it's conscious choice backed by action. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their kids threw them a surprise party. Friends from every stage of their lives came, FBI colleagues, nursing school friends, former therapy group members, people whose lives they touched. During the toasts, Emma stood up. My parents have an unusual love story, she said. Dad lied about literally everything when they met. He was a teenage con artist dating an FBI agent's daughter. By all logic, this relationship should have exploded spectacularly. Laughter rippled through the room. But instead, they built something real. Not because it was easy. Not because the past magically disappeared. But because they chose each other every single day. Dad chose to be honest, even when lying would have been easier. Mom chose to trust again, even when doubt would have been safer. Emma looked at her parents with tears in her eyes. They taught me that we're all works in progress. That making mistakes doesn't make you irredeemable. That change is possible but requires genuine effort. And that love, real love, means seeing someone's whole truth and choosing them anyway. Marcus stood and pulled Claire close. 40 years, he said softly, just for her. 40 years of you choosing me. I still can't believe it sometimes. 40 years of you being worth choosing, Claire replied. That's the part that matters. Today, Marcus Sullivan is 73 years old. Claire is 74. They live in a modest house in suburban Virginia. They have 4 grandchildren who know Grandpa Marcus has an interesting past, but mostly know him as the man who tells terrible jokes and helps with math homework. Marcus volunteers teaching fraud awareness to seniors, protecting people from the kinds of scams he once perpetrated. Claire volunteers at a children's hospital, still unable to walk away from helping kids. They still go to therapy sometimes. Not because they're broken, but because they believe in maintaining what they've built. On weekends, they take walks in the same park where Marcus first confessed his lies all those years ago. Sometimes they sit on that bench and talk about how far they've come. Do you ever regret it? Marcus asked once. Everything you went through because of me? Claire was quiet for a moment, really thinking about it. I regret the pain. I regret the lies. I regret the years we lost. She took his hand. But I don't regret you. The person you became, the person you chose to become, that's who I fell in love with. That's who I married. Even knowing what you know now? Even knowing how hard it would be. Especially knowing that. Because you showed me what real change looks like. What genuine redemption means. You showed me that people's worst moments don't have to be their defining moments. Marcus smiled. I was 17 when we met. A kid pretending to be a doctor. I thought I was so smart, pulling off this elaborate con. You were smart. Just not in the way you thought. What do you mean? You were smart enough to recognize that what we had was worth more than any con. Smart enough to turn yourself in. Smart enough to do the hard work of change. Claire squeezed his hand. That takes more intelligence than any forgery. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the park. Marcus thought about that scared 17-year-old kid who'd run away from home all those years ago. The kid who'd learned to lie so well he forgot how to be real. He thought about the choices that led him here, some terrible, some brave, some desperate. And he thought about Claire. About how loving her had forced him to confront who he really was. About how being loved by her had given him a reason to become someone better. You know what the greatest con I ever pulled was? Marcus asked. What? Convincing myself I didn't need anyone. That I could keep running forever. That I could live my whole life behind masks and be fine. He looked at her. You saw through that con. You made me face the truth. And what truth was that? That I was just a scared kid who wanted a home. A family. Someone who knew all my truths and stayed anyway. He kissed her hand. Thank you for staying. Thank you for being worth staying for. As they walked home hand in hand, Marcus Sullivan, former con artist, reformed criminal, FBI consultant, husband, father, grandfather, felt something he'd spent most of his life chasing. Not because his past had disappeared. Not because he'd earned some kind of complete redemption. But because he finally knew who he was. Really knew. Not Dr. Whitfield. Not whatever other identities he'd worn. Just Marcus Sullivan. Flawed, honest, imperfect Marcus Sullivan. And that, he'd learned, was enough.